Hi everyone, we are excited to have you join us for our webinar on troubleshooting common errors while using Distill. We've planned this webinar with a focus on topics like handling selection empty, timeout errors, and also false positives. Our speaker for the day is Surya. He's the Chief Information Officer at Distill. I hope all of you find this webinar informative. Over to you, Surya.
Hey everyone. Firstly, thank you so much for taking time out to join us today. As Vaishnavi already discussed and we have already shared over the emails, the topic for today's webinar is going to be looking at troubleshooting errors in Distill. Without any further delay, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen and start showing you some of the aspects of how we can actually troubleshoot various errors that are encountered while using Distill. I hope you're all able to see my screen right now. So let me kind of give you an overview of how we are going to structure the overall presentation for the day. We'll start off with talking about various issues that are encountered in Distill. The first section we'll cover about things on how you can manage various errors that are encountered by users while using Distill. In the next section, we will look at talking about false positives and how to mitigate them. What are the strategies that you can use to mitigate them? Why do they occur? What are the most common scenarios where they occur? And how you can manage your monitors in those scenarios. So let's move ahead. So typically the type of issues that are encountered are error notifications. So some of these errors, the most common ones that include selection empty errors, timeout errors, EMACRO errors, if any one of you have used macros. And also there are some other error types apart from this, which are less common, but they do occur as well. Second section is going to be associated with false positives. Essentially, a false positive is a scenario that you encounter when you are notified of a change on a page where one, either no change is directly visible, or two, it is a change that is insignificant or of no interest to you as far as monitoring the particular page and the data associated with it is concerned. So we will also talk about those in the sections. So first section, while I'm talking about errors, the first and most important aspect is what are errors? How do you identify these errors? Understanding the potential causes of why errors can occur. And what do you do in the event or a scenario when an error actually happens? Let's take a pause and try to understand the potential reasons why errors actually occur. So typical reasons why errors actually occur would be one, there is a change in some sort of the layout of the page. While it might not be visible to the naked eye, all these pages have HTML code behind them. And if something changes behind the HTML code, that can potentially lead to errors on the page. The second reality that we face today is almost every page today is dynamically built. That means that all the data in the page is not loaded at one go. So sometimes what happens is where before Distill actually performs a check, all the data on the page is not fully loaded, and that could lead to potential errors. Another thing that we also face at times is because we are running checks from the cloud at times, you might face a bot detection. So for example, any scenario where you would have seen a page which has thrown a captcha at you, or they ask you a question saying, is this a robot or a human? Is essentially some sort of a mechanism that is trying to detect that there is a bot which is trying to open the page and look at the page. Another potential cause for errors, specifically if you have ever used profiles in Distill, is essentially associated with cookies getting expired. We will also look at this scenario as well. Now, before we go into the details of the errors and how to understand the errors, I will also take a moment to actually showcase to you how you can identify errors when they occur in Distill. These are some of the error types that we will cover in more detail today, and also help you understand how you can address those error types and what to do if you actually encounter those. So let me go ahead to the my Distill's watch list here. So the first and the foremost thing, as we discussed, is how do you identify errored out scenarios? The easiest way to do this in Distill is on the left-hand side, right below the add monitor page. You will see one of the filters called error. You can simply click on it, and you will get the list of monitors which are actually under an errored state. I hope that was easy to figure out. So now let's go back to I'll briefly go back to the presentation to pick one of the error types that I will start off with. So let's start off with timeout error. Okay. So here I have an example of one of the pages which actually shows a timeout error. So before I understand, let me go into the detail of how you can identify what is the error that has occurred for a particular monitor. The easiest way to do that is around the area where the timestamp exists, you will see it in red if it is actually in an error state. So click the drop down here and you will see the details of what happened in history. If you hover over a particular error, you can see some details on it. What I would also recommend is specifically going to the view details section. It'll open up a new tab and it'll actually show you what happened. Furthermore, you will actually get to know more details associated with what is the error and what is the notification associated with the error. The notification associated with this error explicitly states that the timeout occurred with 32,000 milliseconds for this particular page. So to understand better as to why a timeout would have occurred in this particular page, I have actually opened the page here and I wanted to showcase the page to you. This particular page is actually loading a table which has a lot of data. Let me do a simple scroll down to show you how big the page size is. So essentially, this is timing out from Distill's perspective because the page is trying to load a lot of data and it has not completed loading within 30 seconds, which is typically the cutoff time after which we will basically post a timeout error. So that is with regards to the timeout error. Let's now go back to the presentation. The next error that we want to cover in significant detail is the selection empty error. So let me go ahead back to my watch list and I'll pick up an example of actually showcasing to you what a selection empty error is. Let's look at this particular Amazon page and we are trying to monitor the price here. So to understand whether in the error, as we said, as I already mentioned to you, click on the drop down and you will see history. As you can see the history, this was last checked at 9:09 a.m. and it actually gave a selection empty error. So let's try to understand what is happening in this scenario. If I click the view details, the first thing Distill does is whenever it encountered the error, it will actually save a snapshot of the page at that point in time and showcase that snapshot to you. So this is the snapshot. As we see, the price is available in this page, but for some reason, Distill was unable to detect it and it gave a selection empty error. It explicitly said that selection does not match any content. I will take a quick detour here to help you understand further in detail as to what is happening when Distill actually checks a page and why is it showcasing a selection empty error. What is exactly, so the way Distill works is Distill actually loads the page in a browser. And once it loads the page in a browser and you select a specific element within Distill, we store the selector associated with that element. Consider this like any query that you would run on an SQL database. The selector is something like that to the page. So you basically run the selector on the page, query the selector to the page, and extract the data associated with the selector. In this case, ideally, we should have got the price, but that selector did not return anything. And that is why we basically threw a selection empty error. Let's go ahead and figure out how we can fix this issue. So to fix this issue, I go and click the drop down here and I click edit options. Opens up the details associated with the monitor. I click open web page selector and I simply hit go here. This should open up the visual selector, which will allow me to select the page. Just give it a moment. It should load the page. The page is loaded. Let's go ahead now and make the selection on the page. I'll use the visual selector and I'll select make the selection on the page. To further understand what is visible here, we basically showcase to you that the price here is actually visible and you can actually see it. You simply hit save. This gets saved. I save this again. So the monitor has been saved. I will quickly rerun the monitor to show you how to showcase that the error has actually been fixed. So as you can see, this is now fixed. You can see that it is in blue color. It was previously in red. If I click the drop down, you can actually see that just now it completed a check at 11:11 a.m. and the value for this is $168. So you can see that. So the error got fixed. That is the easiest way to go ahead and fix the selection empty error. We also showcase the snapshot to you so that it is better for you to help understand as to why that error would have occurred or what may have happened in that scenario. I will showcase another scenario later today where you will exactly be able to understand why the selection empty error actually happened. This is in the case of profiles. Let me go ahead and showcase that to you. So here I have actually set up a sample scenario where I'm actually trying to monitor the daily usage behind the Distill login. To know your daily usage within Distill's login, the easiest way is you click the bar chart here and click daily usage, and you want to monitor this table. But for us to be able to monitor this table, we need to be able to log into Distill. And for that, we need to have our cookies saved. So let's go back to the monitor. You see that this monitor is an error. And if I hit the dropdown, you can actually see that there is a selection empty error. So this is something that is encountered quite often with regards to profiles, wherein what happens is the cookies associated with the profile have expired, and in which case I am not able to access the page that I should have been able to access, and you will usually throw a selection empty error because there is the required selection on the page was not loaded. Let me open the details and showcase to you. I'll open the view details here. As you can see, I'm seeing the sign in page here. So this essentially is a trigger for me that I was unable to log into the profile using the profile's cookies because the cookies have expired. It is just showing the main page that was there, which is just the signing page, and I'm not able to go in and monitor, and hence the error. How do I fix the profiles issue? It's pretty straightforward. The easiest thing that you can do is go here, go to the profiles section using your hamburger icon. Go to the specific profile, open this profile in the remote browser, and save the cookies again. As simple as that. And as long as it is linked to the monitor will run the next time, and you should be good to go. Let me go back to the presentation now, and let's look at a couple of other scenarios that are there that can happen. Let's look at another case of a selection empty error that could occur. In this example, now I'm actually going to take the Walmart product page that is there here, which is in an error state. You can see that there is a selection empty error here. This is another peculiar scenario, and let me showcase to you what happens in this scenario. The page looks perfectly fine when it's loaded, but it is actually changing something on the elements. As you can see, it is trying to do a bot detection in this scenario. So let me help you understand what are the ways in which you can circumvent this scenario. So there are two different mechanisms that I would recommend here. One is using the local monitor, which is essentially using your extension to monitor such pages. This will basically run the checks locally from your machine and not from the cloud. That is a good way to essentially circumvent that challenge. The second scenario, let me open this and showcase to you how you can do that. The second scenario I would recommend, methodology I would recommend would be to use higher grade proxies, which are available on our premium plans. So what you can do is you can click options here, and here by default it's a shared proxy pool. You can go and highlight and pick up any of the higher grade proxies, and these higher grade proxies will should then be able to circumvent some of the challenges that you would face potentially because of bot detection. Okay, so let me now go back to this. So we talked about the selection empty error, we talked about the timeout error. Let's also look at the EMACRO error for a moment, which you might encounter at times. So I do have an example here associated with the EMACRO error. So let me open this up. And as you can see, you actually see an EMACRO error that happened here. Let me go into the detail. And if you go into the detail, you would actually see that the challenge is associated here. It gives you further detail as to what happened. Essentially, there was an issue with the macro playback. The actions that you recorded in the macro did not play out properly or completely, and that essentially caused the error. It will usually also tell you which was the selector that basically ended up causing the error. In this case, it will basically give you the details of the selector and the associated step, which is essentially the step was a click in the macro, which caused some issues. Let's go and figure out how to debug this issue. To debug this issue, I would recommend to go into your macros section. And in this case, this is the CNN demo macro. Open this macro in the recorder and simply try replaying the macro. So when you try replaying the macro in the recorder, it will go through each of the steps that were associated with it. Typically stop at a particular step, which is actually causing the challenge associated with the macro. Okay. So in this case, as you would have probably guessed, this last step is what is causing the challenge, and you will at some point see that this particular step will show up an error in red because it could not complete the step. The easiest way to fix the macros is simply go ahead and re-record the macro again. And if you re-record the macro, those steps should work. Another recommendation that I would have typically associated with macros is every time you record a macro, you simply replay it before actually saving the macro to ensure that your macro steps that you had actually recorded got recorded properly, and it is actually following the set of actions that you actually intended it to follow. As you can see, it actually gave an error associated with the selector here. You will have the ability to go and fix the selector from here. You can change the step, you can edit the step, you can do anything that you need in the macro recorder here. So that is associated with macros. So we have already talked about a bunch of potential errors that occur and how you can potentially troubleshoot when those errors happen. Additionally, some of the resources that I would point you to is to go to our documentation page, which talks about log of checks and how you can look at the details associated with the errors. Some of the things that we covered today during the course of the webinar. Furthermore, what I would also recommend to you is in case if you face a situation where you are unable to look at fix things on your own, I would recommend that you please visit our forum and make a post on our forum, and someone from our team will definitely reach out to you and try to help you out, or even the community people from the community will be willing to help you out as well. Let's now move ahead and let's talk about false positives. So firstly, let's define what a false positive is. A false positive is a scenario where you received a notification for a change, but either there is no identifiable change that has happened in the page, or possibly a change is detected, but that is something that is not significantly relevant for your work or for your intent that you're looking to monitor on the page. One of the most common occurrence of false positive scenarios is on full page monitors. Usually full pages have some sort of dynamic elements across the page. Some of the most common that we observe a lot of times are essentially some sort of date counters, like the date has changed, or something very small has changed on the page, and that is continuously sending you notifications. Thankfully, there are very easy and simple ways to be able to mitigate and manage false positive notifications. Let me talk about some of those, and I will actually showcase to you some of these as examples as well. So the first, what I would recommend is, if you are looking specifically at text on the page, look at our text mode in the diff, and that should significantly make it concise in terms of the changes that are getting monitored. The second strong recommendation I would have is narrow your selection on the page using our visual selector. The narrower you make it to the specific area that you're looking to monitor, the better your monitor will perform. Distill also provides the ability to deselect parts of the page which are effectively noisy. So you can make a bigger selection, and you can deselect certain pieces of the page, certain parts of the page, to ensure you're looking at the area that is of specific interest to you. Furthermore, what you can also do is, beyond all of this, Distill also provides you to allow conditions for your monitoring. So you can set up more advanced conditions, which will allow you to filter out certain kinds of changes which are potentially inevitable, or you're unable to select, and things like that. Lastly, while this is not very common these days, because more often than not, most pages are dynamic and they have certain scripts and things like that that load. But if not, and if it is just the content that gets loaded, then you can potentially just disable the JavaScript and then be able to monitor it. This is also helpful at times where there is JavaScript which is potentially loading like things like cookie pop-ups and things like that. And those can get those will not get loaded, and you will be able to monitor the data, the raw data in itself. Now, while I have talked about all this, let me go ahead and showcase to you some examples on the false positives. Let me go here. I'll take an example of false positive here. So essentially, let me look at, first, let me show you the page that I'm going to look for. So the page I'm going to monitor is a forums page. It is a very generic Linux forums page, and it is a highly monitored page in terms of, you can see the number of pages here is like 459. You can see when the last post was made and who made the last post and things like that. What you're interested in is this page. So let's go ahead and let me first showcase to you how a full page monitor would look like on this. So to set up a full page monitor, you can simply take the page, add the URL and click the full page monitor. Let me show you how the full page monitor changes look like. As you can see, it is saying that there are 12 different changes on this page. Let's try and see if we can identify those changes. First is a change that's there here. If we go all the way down, you can see that there is a date counter here, which is essentially effectively being shown as changed. So this is going to keep giving me notifications of every time I refresh saying, hey, something changed on this page, and that would effectively potentially boil down to just being this date counter. For a moment, I'm going to go back to the side-by-side diff, and I actually want to show you how the text diff looks like instead of the visual diff. If you look at the text diff, it says that there are effectively two changes. This was the first change that was there. And the second change, as you can note, is effectively here from 6:36 to 6:37 a.m. That's essentially a date counter. This 6:36 to 6:37 a.m. change is always going to show up in every one of yours, which is going to potentially be annoying because while anything of interest has not really changed, but this time counter has changed and it will keep sending notifications for this full page monitor. So the first step, what I'm going to do is I'm going to help you set up the monitor where I will actually showcase only a certain area that is selected for you to be able to look at. Let me showcase that to you. So I'll just copy the URL associated with this page. And I'll go ahead and I'll say add monitor on the web page. Now let's go ahead and use the visual selector to select parts of the page. So I'll go ahead and select this. Let me start expanding. I'm only interested in all the posts that are there. You can see I have just selected the posts within this page. Now I can simply hit save. So it will save that. And I'm going to rename this as Linux forums posts. And I'll give it the tag that I want to give, and I'll hit save. As you can see, the preview is getting generated. Let's just give it a moment. You can see the preview got generated, and you can see that only the area that is associated with the forum posts has been populated here. So this will ensure that the false positive potentially associated with the timestamp is not available. Another way to do the same thing is to be able to take select the entire page, but with deselecting the timestamp. I'll quickly showcase the setup to you here. And separately, what I'll do is I'll take a sample page and I will actually show you how the selection and deselection works so that it will be beneficial to you. So let me, oops, 1 moment. I'll hit open web page selector, I hit go. As you can see here in red is basically the deselected area that is associated with the timestamp. Because the text in this page is large, so even if while I show you the preview, you will not be able to identify it from the preview. So I will take a different example and I'll actually show it to you on how that actually works in practice. Let me simply save this. I'll save this. Now let me open a new page. Let me open the page. Let's say I'm going to open. This is a standard time ticker. So now I will make a selection on this page. So let's say I make this as the selection. And now I can actually go and deselect elements inside. So if you see, the ones in red are effectively elements that I've deselected in the page. Let me show you what happens when I deselect things. Oh, sorry. 1 moment. I hit the wrong button. Just give me 1 moment. What I wanted to show you was the preview. As you can see in the preview here, you can see Los Angeles, London, Paris. Paris is not selected. Let me deselect the text from here. And as you can see, the time associated with Paris got vanished. Whatever I'm deselecting will effectively vanish from the page. So essentially, if I don't want any of the times and I just want the list of the names, I can select the entire list and I can have deselected all the elements associated with time. So only the remaining text is what is there, and this is what is going to get selected and notified. This is the easiest way in which you can actually do a deselection and ensure that your monitors are constrained to what you're interested in actually monitoring. Okay. That we effectively come to an end in terms of what we wanted to kind of present and showcase to you overall. I do want to talk about one more specific scenario associated with selection empty errors, which occurs when you have been blocked. And as you can see in this area about Walmart, where this robo or human was there, we already spoke about it. So in these kind of scenarios, as I mentioned, there are two things that you can do. You can actually set up local monitors; they work much better, and we are able to sync all the notifications across devices and things like that. So that should work well as well. With that, I do want to talk about everything that we talked about today very quickly, briefly back here. And so what we talked about today included things like how do you identify different kinds of errors, what are the false positives that are there, and how you can address those challenges. With this, I will actually end my presentation right now.